The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Kate Morrison took her first step onto Nexus Prime. The air smelled different here. It carried the scent of 100 different species, metal, recycled oxygen, and something else she could not name. She stood still for a moment, letting her eyes adjust to the blue-tinted lights of the docking bay. Nexus Prime was the largest trading station in the known galaxy. It floated in the space between 3 major star systems, and every species that had achieved space travel eventually found their way here. Kate had studied the station for months before her assignment. She knew its layout, its politics, and its dangers. But knowing something and experiencing it were two very different things. Carveth dock workers stopped loading cargo to stare at her. The creature stood nearly 8 feet tall, with dark green scales and eyes that reflected light like a cat. Its arms ended in hands that had 4 fingers, each tipped with a curved claw designed for tearing flesh. The Carveth were apex predators on their home world. They had conquered 3 other species before joining the galactic community. They feared nothing. Kate met the creature's gaze and nodded politely. The Carveth tilted its head, confused by this small being that did not look away. After a moment, it returned to its work. She picked up her single bag and walked toward the main corridor. Her orders were simple. She was to establish a permanent human embassy on Nexus Prime and represent Earth's interests in all trade and diplomatic matters. She was the first human to hold this position. The weight of that responsibility sat heavy on her shoulders, but she did not let it show on her face. The corridor opened into a massive central hub. Kate stopped walking and simply looked. The ceiling rose hundreds of feet above her, disappearing into a haze of lights and floating platforms. Thousands of beings moved through the space. Some walked, some flew, some crawled along the walls on dozens of legs. The noise was overwhelming at first, a blend of languages and sounds that her translator implants struggled to process. She noticed the patterns quickly. The larger species walked in the center of the pathways. The smaller ones stayed near the edges, moving quickly and keeping their heads down. It was the same dynamic she had read about in her briefings. The galaxy operated on a simple rule: predators ruled, and prey survived however they could. Humans did not fit neatly into either category. When Earth made first contact 3 years ago, the Galactic Council had spent months trying to classify them. Humans have forward-facing eyes, a trait shared by every predator species in the known galaxy. But they lacked natural weapons. No claws, no fangs, no venom. Their bodies were soft and slow compared to true hunters, yet humans ate meat. They had a long history of hunting on their home world. They worked together in groups like pack predators, but they also formed large communities like prey species. They were something the galaxy had never seen before, and that made everyone nervous. Kate made her way through the hub toward the administrative sector. She had an appointment with the station governor to present her credentials. The governor was a Maloxy, a species that resembled a cross between a bear and an octopus. They were known for their neutral politics and their love of bureaucracy. As she walked, she felt eyes on her from every direction. Word had spread that a human was coming to the station. Most species had never seen one in person. Kate kept her pace steady and her expression calm. She had learned long ago that showing fear was an invitation for trouble. A group of Draxen blocked the pathway ahead. There were 4 of them, typical for their pack structure. They looked like wolves that had learned to walk upright, with gray fur and yellow eyes that tracked movement with unsettling precision. The Draxen were bounty hunters and mercenaries. They respected only strength. Kate did not slow down. She walked directly toward them, and at the last moment, she stepped slightly to the side to pass. It was not a retreat. It was simply efficient movement. One of the Draxen sniffed the air as she passed and made a sound that her translator interpreted as a laugh. She ignored it and kept walking. the administrative sector was quieter. The beings here wore the markers of officials and diplomats. Kate found the governor's office and presented herself to the secretary, a small creature with blue skin and too many eyes. The secretary seemed surprised that she had arrived on time and alone. Most new ambassadors brought large groups of staff, and security. Kate had insisted on coming by herself. She wanted the station to see exactly who she was before she brought anyone else. The governor received her in a large office filled with strange plants and flowing water features. Governor Melox was enormous, filling most of the room with their bulk. 8 tentacles moved constantly, handling different tasks while their main eyes focused on Kate. The governor welcomed her to Nexus Prime and expressed hope for productive relations between their station and the human species. It was a formal greeting, practiced and empty of real meaning. Kate thanked the governor and presented her credentials. She explained that Earth wanted peaceful trade and cultural exchange. She said that humans had much to offer and much to learn. She kept her words simple and her promises modest. Governor Melox seemed pleased by this. The last thing the station needed was another aggressive species making demands. They approved her embassy location and assigned her a small staff of local workers to help with the setup. As Kate left the office, she passed a group of Vellani waiting in the outer room. They were small creatures, barely reaching her waist, with long ears and soft fur that made them look like rabbits. Their large eyes watched her with an intensity that seemed out of place on such gentle faces. One of them, an elder with gray patches in her brown fur, stepped forward and spoke. She welcomed the human to the station and said that her people would be watching with great interest. Kate thanked her and asked what the Vellani hoped to see. The elder smiled, showing flat teeth meant for plants, not flesh. She said they hoped to see something new. The old ways had governed this station for too long. Perhaps the humans would bring change. Kate considered this for a moment. She said she made no promises, but she believed that change was always possible. She walked away toward her new embassy, carrying that conversation with her. She had come to this station expecting to deal with predators. She had not expected the prey species to be watching so closely, but as she would learn in the days to come, the prey often saw things that the predators missed. And on Nexus Prime, seeing clearly was the difference between survival and destruction. 2 weeks passed on Nexus Prime, and Kate Morrison settled into a routine. She woke early, reviewed reports from Earth, met with traders and diplomats, and spent her evenings learning the station's hidden rhythms. She hired a young man named Danny Cole as her assistant. He had arrived on the second supply shuttle, eager and nervous in equal measure. Danny was 24 years old and fresh from the diplomatic training program. He had studied alien languages and customs, but he had never actually met an alien until he stepped onto the station. Kate watched him flinch every time a Carveth walked past. She understood his fear. She simply chose not to share it. The human embassy occupied a small suite of rooms in the diplomatic quarter. It was modest compared to the massive compounds of the Carveth or Draxan delegations. Kate preferred it that way. Large displays of power invited challenges. Small, efficient operations invited curiosity. The morning of the incident started like any other. Kate needed supplies from the central market, and she decided to go herself rather than send Danny. She wanted to be seen walking through the station alone. Every appearance built her reputation, piece by piece. The central market was a vast open space filled with stalls and shops from every corner of the galaxy. Merchants sold everything from food to weapons to technology that bordered on magic. The noise was constant, a blend of haggling and arguments and the occasional scream. When a deal went wrong, Kate moved through the crowd with practiced ease. She had learned to read the flow of bodies, to sense when trouble was brewing before it arrived. That instinct saved her today, She heard the commotion before she saw it. A group of Minari traders had set up a stall near the water fountain. They were tiny creatures, no bigger than house cats, with 6 legs and delicate antennae that quivered when they were frightened. The Minari dealt in rare crystals used for power generation. They were valuable traders, but physically helpless. A Draxon pack had surrounded their stall. The pack leader, a massive gray male named Vexus, stood with his arms crossed and his yellow eyes fixed on the trembling Minari. Kate could not hear his words, but she understood the situation immediately. Protection fees. It was an old game, older than space travel itself. Pay or suffer. The Minari were pulling crystals from their inventory, preparing to hand over their profits for the week. Other merchants watched from a distance, careful not to get involved. This was normal on Nexus Prime. Predators took what they wanted. Prey gave what they had to give. Kate changed direction and walked toward the stall. Danny appeared at her side, breathless from running to catch up. He grabbed her arm and whispered urgently. He told her they should keep walking. This was not their business. The Draxon were dangerous, and there was nothing to gain from interfering. Kate removed his hand gently but firmly. She told him to stay back and watch. Then she continued forward. The crowd parted for her without being asked. News of the human ambassador had spread, and everyone wanted to see what she would do. Kate felt hundreds of eyes on her as she approached the Draxon pack. Vexus noticed her when she was 10 feet away. He turned to face her, a grin spreading across his muzzle. He asked what the little human wanted. His packmates laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed off the market walls. Kate stopped walking. She looked at the Minari, huddled together in terror, then back at Vexus. She spoke one word, clear and calm. No. The laughter stopped. Vexus tilted his head, genuinely confused. He asked what she had said. Kate repeated herself. No, the Minari would not be paying protection fees today or any other day. They were under Earth's protection now. Vexus stepped closer. He towered over her, nearly 3 feet taller and 4 times her weight. His breath was hot on her face, smelling of meat and something sour. He asked what exactly she planned to do about it if he disagreed. Kate did not step back. She did not look away. She held his gaze with steady brown eyes and began to speak. She told him about Earth. She explained that humans had once lived as prey on their world. They were slow. They were weak. They had no claws or fangs or armor. Every predator on the planet should have wiped them out in a single generation. But humans had something else. They had memory. They had patience. They had a will that refused to break. She told him how humans hunted mammoths, creatures 10 times their size, by following them for days until the beasts collapsed from exhaustion. She told him how humans drove wolves to extinction in most of Europe, not through single battles, but through relentless, never-ending pressure. She told him how humans burned forests and drained swamps and changed the entire surface of their planet to eliminate things they considered threats. She told him about the wars humans fought against each other. Wars that lasted decades. Wars where they poisoned the very air and split atoms to create weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. Humans did these things to each other, to their own species, because they could not agree on ideas. Vexus was no longer smiling. His packmates had stopped laughing. The market had gone silent around them. Kate finished by explaining what would happen if he touched her or any being under Earth's protection. Human ships were stationed 2 days away. A message could reach them in hours. And when humans came for revenge, they did not stop. Not when wounded. Not when outnumbered. Not when it made no logical sense to continue. Humans held grudges across generations. They built monuments to remember their enemies. They wrote songs about ancient battles and taught their children to hate the descendants of those who had wronged them. She asked Vexus a simple question. Was a few crystals worth becoming the subject of human attention? The silence stretched for a long moment. Kate could see Vexus calculating, weighing his pride against this strange new threat. His instincts told him he could kill her before she could fight back. His brain told him that killing her would be the last free act he ever committed. Vexus stepped back. He growled something to his pack about the humans not being worth the trouble. Then he turned and walked away without looking back. Kate watched them go. Then she turned to the Minari and asked if they were all right. The tiny creatures stared at her with enormous eyes. Their antennae had stopped quivering. One of them, the eldest, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. It asked why she had helped them. Humans gain nothing from protecting Minari. Kate smiled and told them that was not entirely true. She said she had gained their gratitude, and that was more valuable than crystals. She returned to the embassy with Danny following in stunned silence. He did not ask questions. He had learned something important today, something no training program could teach. By evening, every predator on the station had heard what happened in the market. The human ambassador had faced down a Draxan pack leader and won without throwing a single punch. They did not understand how that was possible, but they understood enough to stay out of her way. The story of the market spread through Nexus Prime like fire through dry grass. Every species told it differently. The predators said the human had threatened Vexus with military force. They said Earth must have powerful weapons to make a Draxan pack leader retreat. They spoke of the humans with new caution, the way one predator speaks of another that might be stronger. But the prey species told a different story. They whispered to each other in the quiet corners of the station, in the maintenance tunnels and the service corridors where predators rarely walked. They spoke of the human woman who had stood like a wall between the weak and the strong. They spoke of her eyes, calm and certain, showing no fear even when facing death. The prey species had survived for countless generations by reading the truth behind actions. They watched body language the way predators watched for weakness. And what they saw in Kate Morrison was something they had never seen before. 3 days after the market incident, a message arrived at the human embassy. It was written on paper, made from pressed plants, a traditional format used by the Villani for important communications. The message requested a private meeting between Ambassador Morrison and Elder Sora of the Villani. Trading Collective. Danny handed the message to Kate with confusion on his face. He did not understand why a prey species would request a formal meeting. The Villani had no power on the station. They were merchants and servants, barely tolerated by the Predator Council. What could they possibly want? Kate read the message twice, then carefully folded it and placed it in her desk drawer. She told Danny to send a response accepting the meeting. She would receive Elder Sora that afternoon. Danny started to ask a question, but Kate raised her hand to stop him. She explained that the prey species made up more than 60% of the station's population. They did the work that kept everything running. They saw things that predators were too proud to notice. Any wise ambassador would listen to what they had to say. Elder Sora arrived precisely on time, accompanied by 2 younger Villani who stayed near the door like guards. Kate thought this was interesting. Prey species did not normally post guards. It suggested they were expecting trouble or wanted to appear strong. The elder was old, her brown fur streaked with gray and white. Her long ears drooped slightly with age, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She walked with a slow dignity that Kate recognized immediately. This was a being who had earned respect through decades of survival. Kate offered her a seat and dismissed Danny from the room. Some conversations needed privacy. Elder Sora settled into the chair, her small body nearly swallowed by its size. She studied Kate for a long moment without speaking. Her whiskers twitched as she processed what her senses told her. Finally, she dipped her head in a gesture of respect. She said the Villani had been watching the human ambassador since her arrival. She said they watched everyone, of course. Watching was how prey survived. But they had watched Kate with special attention. Kate asked why. Elder Sora's ears lifted slightly. She said the predators thought they understood what happened in the market. They believed the human had won through threat of violence. They saw Kate as a rival predator, something dangerous to be avoided. But the Villani saw the truth. She explained that predators lived in the moment. They reacted to immediate threats with immediate force. They did not plan beyond their next hunt. They did not build systems or think in generations. That was why they always ended up fighting each other. That was why predator empires rose and fell while prey species endured. Kate listened without interrupting. She had learned that prey species often spoke in circles before reaching their point. Patience was required. Elder Sora continued. She said humans were not predators. Not truly. They had the eyes of hunters, yes, and the appetites. But their minds worked differently. Humans planned. Humans remembered. Humans built structures that lasted beyond individual lives. She said the Villani had a word for what humans were. It did not translate perfectly into common galactic language. The closest meaning was something like the ones who choose their prey. Not hunters driven by hunger, but something more frightening. Killers who selected their targets through thought and decision. Kate considered this. She asked if the Villani found this frightening. Elder Sora smiled, showing her flat herbivore teeth. She said no. She said it was the first hope her people had felt in 300 years. The Elder explained the history of prey species on Nexus Prime. When the station was built, the Galactic Council promised equal treatment for all species. That promise lasted less than a decade. The predator species took control through simple force. They demanded payments and obedience. They wrote laws that favored their own kind. The prey species could either accept this reality or, but leaving meant abandoning the most important trading hub in the galaxy. It meant poverty and isolation. So the prey species stayed. They learned to walk near the walls. They learned to give up their profits to avoid violence. They learned to be invisible. Until now. Elder Sora leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Kate. She said the prey species had seen what happened in the market. They had seen a small human face a predator and refuse to move. They had seen Kate choose to protect the weak, not from instinct or hunger, but from decision. She asked if the humans would stand for the prey species. Not just the Minari. All of them. The Villani and the Piddick and the Sorelli and every other species that lived in fear. Kate was silent for a long time. She understood the weight of this question. If she said yes, she would be committing Earth to a position that could lead to conflict with every predator species in the galaxy. If she said no, she would lose the trust of more than half the station's population. She asked Elder Sora what the prey species offered in return. The Elder nodded, pleased by this practical response. She explained that the prey species controlled things the predators did not understand. The Villani ran most of the station's commerce. The Piddick maintained the communication networks. The Minari controlled the crystal trade that powered half the technology on the station. The Sorelli managed every water and waste system. The predators had force. The prey species had everything else. Kate thought about this carefully. She thought about the small embassy and the 2 human ships stationed days away. She thought about Earth's position in a galaxy they had only recently joined. She thought about what was right. She extended her hand across the table. It was a human gesture of agreement, one she had explained to many alien species during her time on the station. Elder Sora looked at the hand. Her ears rose to full height, a sign of strong emotion in her species. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and wrapped her small fingers around Kate's palm. Kate said she could not promise everything. She said she was one ambassador with limited resources. But she promised this. Any species under Earth's protection would stay under Earth's protection. She would not abandon them. Elder Sora's eyes glistened with moisture. She said that was more than any predator had ever offered. They talked for another hour, working out the details of their new alliance. When Elder Sora left, she walked a little taller than when she had arrived. Her guards noticed the change and exchanged glances of wonder. Word spread through the prey community that night. The human had agreed to protect them. The human had taken their side. For the first time in centuries, the prey species had a champion, and on Nexus Prime, everything began to change. 3 months after Kate Morrison arrived on Nexus Prime, the station had become a different place. The changes were small at first, easy to miss if you were not paying attention. But once you saw them, you could not unsee them. The Vallani no longer walked near the walls. They moved through the main corridors with their ears held high and their eyes forward. When predators approached, the Vallani did not scramble to get out of the way. They simply continued walking, and more often than not, the predators were the ones who stepped aside. The Minari had reopened their market stalls without paying protection fees. Their crystal business had doubled in size. They hired pit guards to watch their inventory, paying fair wages for honest work. No one bothered them anymore. The Sorelli, those quiet amphibian beings who maintained the water systems, had started attending public meetings. For the first time in station history, a Sorelli representative sat on the Commerce Council. Predator species had laughed at first. Then they realized the Sorelli could shut off water to any section of the station with a single command. Kate had not built an army. She had built something more powerful. She had built a network. Every prey species on the station now had a line of communication to the human embassy. Trade disputes went through Kate for mediation. Safety concerns went through Kate for protection. Major decisions affecting prey communities went through Kate for approval. She had become the center of a web that connected every being the predators had dismissed as unimportant. Danny had grown in these 3 months. He no longer flinched when predators walked past. He had learned to speak Vallani and could manage basic conversations in Pedic click language. Kate trusted him to handle minor, diplomatic matters while she focused on larger strategy. The predators were slow to understand what was happening. They lived in a world of direct confrontation, where power meant physical force. The idea of power through connection and service confused them. But confusion was turning to concern. Gorrn, the Garvith representative who had blocked Kate's path on her first day, requested a formal meeting. His message arrived through official diplomatic channels, proper and correct. Kate accepted immediately. She had been waiting for this conversation. The Garvith arrived at the embassy alone, which was unusual. His species preferred to travel in groups for display of strength. Going alone meant he wanted privacy. It meant he had things to say that his own people should not hear. Kate received him in her office. She had rearranged the furniture since taking over the space. The desk was gone, replaced by a low table surrounded by cushions. It created a more equal atmosphere, removing the barriers that traditional office layouts created. Visitors often relaxed here without realizing why. Gorrn lowered himself onto a cushion with difficulty. His large body was not designed for such positions. Kate offered him a cup of earth coffee, which she had learned the Garvith enjoyed. He accepted and drank deeply, his clawed hands surprisingly gentle with the small cup. For several minutes, neither spoke. Kate had learned that Garvith considered silence a sign of respect. Rushing to fill quiet space was seen as weakness. She simply waited, comfortable in the pause. Finally, Gorrn spoke. He said she had created problems. Serious problems. The natural order of the station had stood for centuries. Predators led. Prey followed. This was the way of things. It was efficient. It was stable. Kate asked if it was just. Gorrn made a sound that her translator struggled with. something between a growl and a laugh. He said justice was a concept prey species invented to make themselves feel better about losing. The strong took what they wanted. That was the only justice the universe offered. Kate shook her head. She told him that was not what her species had found. Humans had been weak once. Physically, they were still weak compared to most predators. But they had discovered something important. Strength alone did not determine who ruled. What determined who ruled? The willingness to suffer, to sacrifice, to continue fighting long after logic said to stop. Goran shifted on his cushion, clearly uncomfortable with this philosophy. He asked what she wanted. What was the point of all this network building and prey protection? Kate considered her answer carefully. She told him she wanted the station to work fairly for everyone. She wanted prey species to walk without fear. She wanted predators to earn respect through leadership rather than violence. She wanted trade and culture and progress, not endless cycles of exploitation and resentment. Goran asked why humans cared. Earth was far away. The station's problems would never touch them. Kate smiled at this. She explained that humans had spent thousands of years exploiting each other. They had built empires on the backs of the weak and called it civilization. They had only recently begun to understand how wrong this was. The scars of that history still marked their world. She said humans recognized themselves in the prey species of Nexus Prime. They remember being small and afraid. They remembered what it felt like to be dismissed as unimportant. And they had decided, as a species, that they would not allow it to happen to others when they had the power to stop it. Goran was silent for a long time. His yellow eyes studied Kate with an intensity she had not seen before. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. He said the Predator Council was concerned. They did not understand the human strategy. They did not know how to respond. Some wanted to attack the embassy, kill Kate, and end the threat before it grew. Others argued this would bring human warships to the station. No one knew what to do. Kate nodded slowly. She told him she appreciated his honesty. She explained that Earth did not want war. They wanted trade and cooperation. But they would defend their allies without hesitation. She asked Goran a direct question. What did the Karvith actually provide to the station? Goran started to answer, then stopped. His mouth opened and closed several times. Kate watched him think, really think, perhaps for the first time in his long life. The predators provided protection, he finally said. But the prey species now had human backing. The predators provided labor, but the prey species did most of the actual work. The predators provided trade connections. But Kate's new networks reached further than any predator alliance. Kate let the silence return. She did not need to say anything. Goran was reaching his own conclusions, and those would be more powerful than any argument she could make. After several minutes, Goran rose from his cushion. He stood at his full height, towering over Kate like a mountain of scales and muscle. But his posture had changed. The aggressive tension was gone, replaced by something closer to respect. He said he would take her words back to his people. He could promise nothing. The Predator Council was stubborn and proud. But he would tell them what he had seen. He would tell them the old ways might be ending. Kate thanked him and escorted him to the door. As he left, she noticed something interesting. The prey species working in the outer office did not look away from him. They met his gaze with calm eyes, then returned to their work. Goran noticed it too. His tail twitched in. What Kate had learned was a sign of discomfort among Karvith. He walked out of the embassy without another word. That evening, Kate sat alone in her office and reviewed her plans. The coalition was almost complete. The prey species trusted her. The predators were uncertain. The moment of decision was approaching, and she intended to be ready. She sent a coded message to Earth, requesting additional ships to move closer to the station. If her plan failed, she would need military backup. If it succeeded, the ships would be proof that her promises had weight. Either way, the next phase was about to begin. 1 year after Kate Morrison arrived on Nexus Prime, a message arrived at the human embassy. It bore the seals of 5 species: Carveth, Draxon, Meloxy, Thornax, and Visk. These were the 5 most powerful predator species on the station, the beings who had ruled through force for 3 centuries. They requested a formal summit to discuss the future of Nexus. Prime. Kate read the message in her office while Danny stood nearby. He had changed significantly in the past year. His shoulders were broader now, his posture confident. He had learned to walk among aliens without fear, to negotiate with predators without flinching. Kate was proud of what he had become. Danny asked if she would attend the summit alone. Kate nodded. She explained that bringing others would suggest she needed protection. That would undermine everything they had built. The predators needed to see her stand alone and unafraid. That image would matter more than any words spoken at the meeting. Danny did not argue. He had learned to trust her judgment. But she saw the worry in his eyes, and she appreciated it. The summit was scheduled for the Grand Chamber at the center of the station. It was the largest meeting space on Nexus Prime, designed to hold thousands of beings. Today, it would hold only a handful, but the symbolism mattered. Major decisions have been made in this chamber for centuries. What happened here would echo through history. Kate prepared carefully for the meeting. She wore her formal diplomatic uniform, simple black fabric with Earth emblem on her shoulder. She carried no weapons and brought no guards. She walked through the station's corridors alone, and every being she passed stopped to watch. The prey species lined the hallways near the Grand Chamber. They did not cheer or call out. They simply stood in silent witness, hundreds of them packed into every available space. Valani and Minari and Piddick and Sorelli, and a dozen other species Kate had come to know. They had come to see what would happen to their champion. Kate paused at the entrance to the chamber. She looked back at the gathered prey species and gave them a small nod. Then she walked through the massive doors. The chamber was nearly empty. A single long table sat in the center, surrounded by chairs designed for different body types. 5 predator delegations occupied one side. Kate walked to the other side and took her seat. She was alone facing the combined might of the Predator Council. The Carveth High Commander spoke first. She was older than Goran, with silver scales and scars that covered most of her visible body. Her name was Vethrix, and she had ruled Carveth interests on the station for 40 years. Vethrix said the council had observed the changes on the station over the past year. They had watched the prey species grow bold. They had watched traditional power structures erode. They had watched the human ambassador build something new in the space between old alliances. She said the council had discussed this at length. They were prepared to offer Ambassador Morrison a place among them. Equal status with the 5 ruling species. Full predator rights under station law. A permanent seat on the council. Kate listened to this offer without expression. She thanked the council for their consideration. Then she declined. The chamber went silent. Even the air recyclers seemed to pause. The Draxon representative, a massive gray female named Torvik, snarled in confusion. She asked what the human wanted, if not power. Kate stood from her seat. She was the smallest being in the room by far, but somehow she seemed to fill the space around her. Her voice was calm and clear, carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. She explained that she was not there to join their hierarchy. She was there to replace it. The prey species of Nexus Prime had signed mutual defense treaties with Earth. The documents had been ratified by human authorities 3 days ago. Any attack on any prey species under the treaties would be considered an attack on humanity itself. The Predator Council erupted. Torvik slammed her clawed hands on the table. Vethrix rose from her seat, towering over everything in the room. The other delegation shouted in their native languages, filling the chamber with chaos. Kate did not move. She did not flinch. She waited. When the noise died down, she continued speaking. She told them the old ways of exploitation and fear were finished. The prey species would no longer pay tribute. They would no longer walk near the walls. They would no longer accept second-class status on a station they helped build and maintain every single day. Torvik growled that the council could destroy Kate before any treaty was enforced. They could kill her here now and deal with the consequences later. Kate smiled at this. She asked if they had noticed that no predator guards had been allowed inside the chamber. The prey species had convinced Governor Melox to change security protocols for the summit. She asked if they had noticed that the Piddick-controlled communication systems were broadcasting this meeting to every screen on the station. Thousands of beings were watching this conversation right now. She asked if they had noticed that 3 human warships had dropped out of Fast of Them Light travel 6 hours ago. They were holding position near the station, waiting for a signal. The predators had noticed none of these things. Kate straightened her uniform jacket. She told them the meeting was finished. Representatives from her office would contact them with the new terms of coexistence. She recommended they accept the terms. The alternative would be unpleasant for everyone. She walked toward the exit. No one moved to stop her. Outside the chamber, the prey species still waited. Their numbers had grown during the meeting. Thousands of beings packed the corridors and balconies, watching in silence as Kate emerged. Elder Sora pushed through the crowd to walk beside her. The old Villani moved with surprising speed, her gray fur shining in the station lights. Sora asked quietly if the humans would truly protect them forever. Kate shook her head. She said no, not forever. They would protect them until the prey species could protect themselves. That was always the plan. Earth would provide ships and training and resources. The prey species would learn to stand on their own. She said humans knew something about this. They had once been weak and afraid. They had learned to be strong. And they had learned, eventually, to use that strength for others. Sora's ears trembled with emotion. She asked how long this would take. Kate smiled and placed a hand on the elder's shoulder. She said it might take years. It might take decades. Change was slow, and old patterns were hard to break. But every journey began with a single step, and the prey species had already taken theirs. They walked together through the station, human and Villani side by side. Behind them, the Predator Council sat in stunned silence, trying to understand what had happened. They had expected a negotiation. They had prepared for threats and counter-threats, for the old games of power they knew so well. They had not expected a simple truth. The universe was changing, and they could either change with it or be left behind. In the corridors of Nexus Prime, the prey species stood tall for the first time in their lives. They did not celebrate. Celebration could wait. For now, it was enough to simply stand without fear. Kate Morrison walked among them, one small human in a galaxy of giants. She had come to this station with nothing but her wits and her will. She had faced down predators and built alliances. She had chosen to hunt the hunters, and she had won. The story of her victory spread across the galaxy in the weeks that followed. Other stations heard about the human ambassador who protected the weak. Other prey species began to hope. Other predators began to worry. The old order was not destroyed in a day. But on Nexus Prime, a door had opened. Through that door walked a future where size did not determine worth. Where strength served justice instead of replacing it. It was, Kate thought, exactly what humans had spent their entire history learning to build. And now they had the chance to share it with the stars.